I was standing at the arrivals curb in Las Vegas with my suitcase between my feet, pretending not to notice how empty my hands felt. Families were reuniting all around me. A kid ran into his dad's arms so hard they almost tipped over. A woman dropped her bags just to hug her mother. Laughter echoed under the concrete overhang, mixing with the sound of rolling luggage and idling engines. Everyone looked like they had been expected. I checked my phone again. No missed calls. No text that said running late or traffic is bad or even I can't make it. Just silence. The kind that sits heavy in your chest when you don't want to admit what it probably means. I shifted my weight, my shoulder aching from the long flight. 10 hours in the air. 1 layover. Too much time to think. I had replayed this moment in my head more than once on the plane, my mom pulling up late, waving from the driver's seat, maybe complaining about parking. Nothing dramatic. Just normal. Normal would have been enough. My phone buzzed in my hand, and for half a second, my heart lifted. Then I saw the notification. Facebook. At the top of my feed was a photo that hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. Bright blue water. White sand. 2 lounge chairs pulled close together. My mom and my little sister, sunburned and smiling, holding drinks with tiny umbrellas. They were wearing matching sunglasses, the kind my mom loved because they made her feel younger. The caption read, "Mom's precious daughter." I stared at the screen, the noise of the airport fading into something distant and dull. My sister's arm was looped through my mom's like she was the only one who belonged there. Like the rest of the world, and the people who made it possible, didn't exist. Something inside me went very quiet. I scrolled down without thinking. Heart emojis. You deserve this. Cutest duo ever. Finally relaxing. No one in the comments asked how they got there. No one wondered who paid for it. They just saw a happy ending and assumed it appeared on its own. I locked my phone and slipped it into my coat pocket. For a moment, I considered calling my mom. Asking if she forgot. Giving her a chance to explain. I had spent most of my life doing that, making space for her reasons, smoothing over the sharp edges so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. But standing there, watching another family pile into an SUV together, I felt the years line up behind me like evidence. 10 years. That's how long I had been sending money home. 10 years of wire transfers and late-night logins and careful budgeting. 10 years of telling myself it was temporary. Just until things stabilized. Just until she caught her breath. Just until the house was safe. I picked up my suitcase and wheeled it toward the edge of the curb, flagging down a taxi. The driver popped the trunk without asking questions. I slid into the back seat and gave him my hotel's name, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. As the car pulled away from the terminal, I took my phone back out. Not to call my mom. Not to send a message. I opened my banking app instead. The familiar numbers loaded instantly, neat and orderly. They had always been my anchor. Numbers didn't lie. They didn't pretend not to remember. I tapped the international support line and put the phone to my ear. When the representative answered, I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't tell my story. I said 6 words. Cancel every card in her name. There was a pause on the line, the soft clicking of a keyboard. Then a calm confirmation. I thanked her and ended the call before she could say anything else. The taxi stopped at a red light. I watched the strip slide by outside the window, all neon and promises. My phone rang almost immediately. Mom. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet. Not until I remembered how we got here. Not until I stopped pretending this moment came out of nowhere. Because standing alone at that airport wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time I stopped ignoring the pattern. By the time I was standing alone at that airport curb, I had already lived most of my life as the responsible one. It didn't start in some dramatic way. There was no single moment where my childhood ended early. It happened quietly, in small shifts that felt reasonable at the time. I grew up in Dallas, in a house that always smelled faintly of laundry detergent and coffee. My mom used to pack my lunches before work, little notes tucked inside reminding me to be good. My dad came home every evening smelling like oil and metal from the garage, his voice always loud enough to fill the kitchen when he said, "As long as we stick together, we'll be fine." For a while, we were. Then my dad got sick. At first, it was just fatigue. He would sit down more often, rub his chest, wave off my mom's worried looks. Then came the appointments, the waiting rooms, the slow realization that the man who once lifted engines with his bare hands needed help standing up from the couch. Hospital bills started arriving in thick envelopes that my mom stacked neatly on the counter, unopened, as if order alone could keep them from becoming real. When my dad died, the house didn't fall apart all at once. It hollowed out. My mom stopped humming while she cooked. She stopped dancing in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. She moved through the house like someone carefully avoiding broken glass, doing what needed to be done but never lingering. I learned quickly which questions not to ask. A year later, she told us we were moving to the outskirts of Las Vegas. She framed it like an opportunity. More jobs. Better chances. A fresh start for all of us. I was still young enough to believe her. I didn't know yet that fresh starts sometimes come with strings attached. Las Vegas felt louder than Dallas. Brighter. Harsher. The sun hit differently there, unforgiving and constant. Casinos rose out of the ground like monuments, impossible to ignore. My mom got a job at a dental clinic. On paper, it sounded stable. In reality, the paycheck barely had time to settle before it was swallowed by bills. At first, the casinos were just a social thing. A few coworkers, a few hours, a story to tell later. The first time she called me from the casino floor, her voice was light in a way I hadn't heard since my dad was alive. "Maddie," she said, almost laughing, "I turned $20 into $800. Can you believe that?" I remember sitting on my bed, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something loosen in my chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe things were finally turning around. Maybe we could stop holding our breath. That feeling didn't last. Soon, the calls sounded different. She would talk about how close she'd been. How the machine was warm. How she could feel a win coming if she just had a little more time. A little more money. The credit cards came out next. Then personal loans. Then quiet reassurances that she would fix it as soon as luck swung back her way. It never did. By the time I graduated nursing school, the house felt like it was balanced on a single missed payment. I took the first job I could find in an intensive care unit back in Dallas, working nights because they paid more. I was 23 and spending my evenings keeping strangers alive while my own family unraveled from a distance. Every call home carried the same undertone. The mortgage was late. The cards were maxed. The collection agencies were calling again. When my mom finally admitted how deep the hole was, the number didn't even feel real. It was too big to wrap my head around. I said the words without thinking them through. "I'll fix it." That was the moment the roles became permanent. I picked up extra shifts. I stopped spending money on myself. I learned how to say no to friends without sounding bitter. And every month, without fail, I sent money home. Not because anyone demanded it outright, but because the silence that followed when I didn't felt worse. What I didn't know then was how quickly help turns into expectation. And how invisible you become once people stop seeing your effort as a choice. I didn't plan to leave the country. At first, all I wanted was a job that paid enough to keep the numbers from getting worse. Nursing helped, but it was never enough to outrun the debt. Every month felt like bailing water out of a sinking boat with a cup. Then a recruiter reached out about a contract overseas. Higher pay. Longer hours. No distractions. I told myself it would be temporary. Just a few years. Just long enough to stabilize things. That's how every big sacrifice starts. The first contract was in the Middle East. Long shifts. Strict rules. Little sleep. I learned how to exist in small spaces, how to measure my life in pay cycles instead of seasons. When my first international transfer went through, my mom cried on the phone. She told me I was saving them. That she didn't know what she would do without me. I let that sentence settle into my bones. From then on, the money moved on a schedule more reliable than any holiday. Mortgage. Credit cards. Consolidation loans. Emergency expenses that somehow kept happening even when I thought we were finally catching up. I tracked everything in spreadsheets, color-coded and dated, because that was the only way I could convince myself this wasn't disappearing into nothing. While I worked, my sister stayed close to home. She was younger, softer around the edges, always quick to say the right thing. My mom called her my light. Said she needed her nearby. Whenever I asked if my sister could help more, the answer was always the same. She's figuring herself out. Don't push her. You know how sensitive she is. So I didn't push. I worked birthdays. I worked holidays. I watched my niece grow up through photos sent hours late. When my mom sent pictures of family dinners, my place at the table was always empty, but I told myself it was fine. I was contributing in a different way. A better way. The way that actually mattered. Somewhere along the line, the thank yous faded. Money requests stopped coming with explanations. They turned into assumptions. Transfers expected by certain dates. Mild panic if something was late. My mom's voice shifted from grateful to sharp without her ever acknowledging the change. I noticed it, but I didn't stop. When one contract ended, I signed another, then another. The numbers slowly started to shrink. Balances moved from red to something manageable. I felt a quiet pride watching totals drop, even as my own life stayed small. I told myself there would be time later. Time to rest. Time to come home. The day the final payment cleared, I was sitting alone in a break room, staring at my phone. For a moment, I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow. 10 years of my life condensed into a single zero balance. I waited for a call that never came. Instead, a week later, my mom texted me a beach photo and said, "We're finally breathing again." I didn't notice then what she didn't say. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say come home. And she didn't say she still needed me. By the time I booked my flight to Las Vegas, I thought the hard part was over. Standing at that airport curb proved how wrong I was. The hotel room was quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No monitors beeping. No overhead announcements. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic drifting in through the window. I sat on the edge of the bed with my suitcase still closed, my coat draped over the chair like I hadn't decided whether I was staying or leaving yet. My phone buzzed again. Mom. This time, I answered. Her voice came through tight and rushed, like she was trying to stay calm and failing. "Maddie, what did you do?" she asked, skipping anything that sounded like hello. "My card got declined. They're saying it's locked. I'm at the hotel front desk and they're acting like I did something wrong." I leaned back against the headboard and stared at the ceiling. "They probably flagged it," I said evenly. "Flagged it for what?" she snapped. "I've been using that card for years." I let a few seconds pass. Not to punish her. Just to breathe. Exactly. She exhaled sharply, the sound brittle. "This is not funny. We're on vacation. I need you to call them and fix this." Fix it. The word landed the way it always had. Automatic. Assumed. I could almost see her standing there, arms crossed, waiting for me to clean up another mess she refused to acknowledge as her own. "I already talked to the bank," I said. There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean I told them to cancel the cards." Her voice dropped. "You can't do that." "I can," I said quietly. And I did. The silence on the line stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then she laughed, short and disbelieving. You're being dramatic. Just call them back. I thought about the years I had spent making myself smaller so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed. The careful budgeting. The nights I chose sleep over meals because I needed to be functional for another shift. The way she never asked how I was handling it. I'm not calling them, I said. Her tone shifted, sharpening. You don't understand what you've done. Your sister's card is linked too. We need access. There it was. Not an apology. Not confusion. Access. I'll be back in town tomorrow, I said instead. We can talk then. No, she said quickly. There's nothing to talk about. You just need to fix it. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I sat there for a long time afterward, phone resting in my palm, my chest tight but steady. I didn't feel angry the way I expected to. I felt clear. Like something that had been loud in my head for years had finally gone silent. The next morning, I drove past my childhood house without stopping. I had arranged everything already. The documents. The account separations. The letter my attorney had helped me draft. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dramatic. It was precise. By the time my mom and sister flew back, their world was already shifting. They just didn't know it yet. And for the first time in a decade, I wasn't the one scrambling to hold it together. They came back 2 days later. I knew because my phone started lighting up again. Missed calls. Voicemails that went from confused to irritated to pleading without ever stopping at reflective. I listened to one, then another, then turned the sound off. I wasn't avoiding them. I was choosing not to interrupt what needed to happen next. On the third day, my mom finally showed up at my hotel. I saw her car pull into the lot from the window. She sat there for a full minute before getting out, adjusting her sunglasses like armor. When she knocked, it wasn't loud. It was careful. Controlled. The knock of someone who still believed they were in charge. I opened the door and stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, scanning the room like she was looking for something out of place. My sister hovered in the doorway for a moment before following, arms crossed, her jaw set in that familiar way that said she was already irritated. What is going on? My mom asked, finally turning to me. Why would you do something like that without talking to us? I gestured to the chair. Sit. She didn't. We don't have time for this. That's fine, I said. I do. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder. Nothing dramatic. Just paper. I placed it on the table between us and opened it, turning it so she could see. Transfers. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers. Notes. Her eyes dropped to the page and moved faster than I expected. She stopped breathing for a second, then shook her head. This doesn't mean what you think it means. It means exactly what it looks like, I said. My sister scoffed. You're acting like you've been paying for everything. That's not fair. I flipped to the next page. Then the next. A decade of quiet support laid out in black and white. The room felt smaller as the stack grew. My mom's face changed color slowly, like a bruise surfacing. She pressed her lips together, then looked up at me with something like disbelief. We never asked you to do all this. You didn't have to, I said. You accepted it. She waved her hand dismissively. Families help each other. Yes, I said. They do. They don't pretend it never happened. The words hung there, heavy but calm. No yelling. No accusations. Just facts. I slid the final document forward. The legal notice. The one that removed my name from anything tied to their finances going forward. No shared cards. No guarantees. No quiet expectations. I'm done, I said. Not angry. Just done. My sister laughed nervously. So what, you're just walking away? I already did, I said. My mom stared at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into something more convenient. When they didn't, her shoulders slumped slightly. Not in guilt. In fear. Because for the first time, there was no safety net beneath her. I picked up my coat and headed for the door. She didn't stop me. And that was when I knew the balance had finally shifted. I expected to feel something dramatic after that. Relief. Triumph. Maybe even regret. What I felt instead was quiet. The kind of quiet you don't notice until you've lived without it for a long time. I left the hotel that morning and drove out toward the edge of the city, past the strip and the neon and the constant promise that things could be different if you just tried one more time. The road opened up, and for the first time since I landed, I wasn't bracing myself for the next call. My mom didn't reach out again that day. Neither did my sister. That silence told me more than any argument ever could. Over the next week, things began to unravel for them in small, unglamorous ways. Bills that had always been paid on time suddenly weren't. Automatic drafts failed. Service reminders turned into warnings. None of it was loud. None of it was public. But it was constant. I heard about it indirectly. An aunt called to check in, her voice careful, asking if everything was okay. A cousin sent a message saying my mom seemed stressed and distracted. No one asked me what had happened. They just assumed I knew. I did. What surprised me was how quickly the story shifted. At first, I was painted as confused. Overworked. Burned out. Then the tone changed. I was selfish. Ungrateful. Cold. The same people who had never asked how I was managing suddenly had opinions about how I should behave. I didn't respond. I focused on my own life instead. I extended my stay long enough to meet with a financial advisor in person. I closed accounts I had kept open out of habit. I rerouted deposits that had always flowed outward. Every signature felt final in the best possible way. One afternoon, while I was packing to leave, my phone buzzed again. Mom. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Her voice was softer this time. Tired. We're having a hard time, she said. No accusation. No demand. Just a statement. I know, I replied. There was a pause. I didn't realize how much you were doing. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That sentence had followed me my entire life, always arriving too late to matter. I realized, I said. She waited, like she expected more. An offer. A compromise. Something that sounded like before. I didn't give her one. After the call ended, I sat on the floor surrounded by half-packed boxes, feeling something settle into place. Not anger. Not sadness. Acceptance. Some people don't change when you explain yourself. They change when they no longer have access. I boarded my flight the next morning with nothing tying me back except memory. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at the city shrinking beneath me and felt steady in a way I never had before. There was still one part left. The part where everything fully ends. And that came later. The letter arrived 3 months later. It wasn't from my mom. It was from the bank. I recognized the envelope immediately. Thick paper. Neutral font. The kind of mail that never brings good news, only confirmations of consequences already in motion. I sat at my kitchen table, my real kitchen this time, not a borrowed space between contracts, and opened it slowly. They were restructuring the loan. Not refinancing. Not extending. Restructuring. Which meant the terms my mom had been skating by on for years were gone. The safety cushions. The quiet grace periods. All of it. Without my income propping things up, the numbers no longer worked. The house as the house, the one everyone swore we were saving, was officially at risk. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt clarity. My phone rang that night. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then a message. Please call me. We need to talk. I didn't. A week later, I heard through family that my sister had moved back in. That the vacation photos were gone. That the house felt tense. That my mom was tired in a way people only get when they can't talk their way out of reality anymore. No one blamed me out loud. They didn't have to. I had already stepped out of the story they needed me to play. The last message I ever sent my mom was simple. No anger. No explanation. I hope you figure it out. I won't be involved. She read it. Didn't reply. And that was the ending. Not a confrontation, not a breakdown, not an apology that came too late. Just a closed door. I still think about that airport sometimes. The way I stood there with my suitcase, waiting for someone who never planned to show up. I realize now that moment wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being replaced. And the moment I stopped funding the illusion, it collapsed on its own. I didn't take revenge. I took my life back. And for the first time in 10 years, everything I built finally belonged to me. Years later, people still ask if I regret it. They expect a dramatic answer. Anger. Bitterness. Some speech about family and forgiveness. I just tell them the truth. Regret only shows up when you abandon yourself. I didn't abandon anyone. I stopped financing a story where I was invisible. My mother learned how expensive denial can be. My sister learned what happens when praise replaces responsibility. And I learned something quieter, but stronger than all of it. When you remove access, the truth introduces itself. No shouting. No revenge. No final argument. Just consequences settling exactly where they belong. The airport curb wasn't where I was left behind. It was where I finally stopped waiting.